So, Jared, what's on your mind for today?
Well, I've been feeling really anxious lately, I think.
Is there a specific time over the last week in which you felt anxious?
Yeah, right. Usually it's when I'm thinking about getting up in front of people, giving a speech.
You gave a speech in the last week?
Yeah, for one of my, just the general public speaking class.
Okay.
Had to get up and pick a topic.
Do you usually feel this way every time you have to get up in front of somebody or a group of people, or was it just this particular time?
When I first started doing it initially, yeah, I kind of had a train of thought that what are they going to think. But yeah, recently, getting up to my last speech in the semester, and I decided to pick a pretty important topic. And
Yeah.
the more and more I think about it, really nervous and shaky and kind of self-doubt.
What would you like to get out of today? Today's session.
I mean, really, I'd like to try and understand ways to...
Like, if you were to set a goal about this particular aspect of your life, what would that be? How would you...
Well, I want to get better at getting up in front of people and feeling calm and relaxed and talking in front of them and getting my speech out in a better manner.
And did you feel these anxious feelings before you were actually up there giving the speech?
Yeah, in foresight, whenever I was, if I was at home jotting down notes about points I want to make, or right before the speech.
Okay.
When I was deciding the topic I wanted to pick, kind of doubting, a little bit.
Did you also feel that way during the speech?
Yeah. At the beginning, it was kind of a little bit smooth at the introduction, but once I started getting into the more some of the details on credit fraud and money inflation, my topic is on some of the monetary situations of our government.
So it sounds like you during the speech you might have been a little unsure about some of the details.
Yeah. Some of the details are a little bit debatable. So surely people are gonna have. You look out in the audience of 40 people, and some people you can see them, and that kind of gets to you. What are they thinking? They're probably thinking, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think your anxious feelings were determined by standing up there, giving a speech, and having that audience have their attention towards you?
Well, yeah, I think so. Like, getting glares from people, kind of like I don't know how to explain, like a vibe from people kind of unnerves you a little bit.
Let me ask you this. If you could imagine 100,000 people, all your same age and gender, standing up there giving a speech, do you think they would all respond in the same way as you did? Namely, feel anxious?
No, probably not. Some people probably wouldn't care.
That's right. So...
no, definitely not.
Yeah. So, if it's not the speech itself that's causing these anxious feelings, it looks like it has to be something else. And in RECBT, we hypothesize that it's the individual's beliefs about giving the speech or about whatever sort of event has happened to them. So, if you can recall, what sort of things do you think you might have been saying to yourself before or during the speech, in terms of just the sentences you were saying to yourself in your mind?
Like what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That I guess that what other people were thinking, that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Like there's more facts. There's no facts in some of his points. You know, like people thinking that me stuttering or muttering or speaking a little quietly kind of.
Why do
he looks
you
like a fool? You know.
Why do you have to not mess up? Why can't you make a mistake?
Why? Well, because I want a good grade. You know, like I wanna improve. Well, I suppose that by doing these things and thinking that way, I don't make that kind of progress.
Yeah.
So, well, you so then, by belief, you think that what I'm saying to myself is what is triggering these kind of anxious.
Yes, because if
emotions.
And if you were just concerned about your if you were just concerned about your grade, that's understandable. But if that was the case, you wouldn't be feeling the way you did. Yeah, I mean, in terms of being so anxious to the point that you're shaking, sweating a lot. Yeah.
Picking up the paper and it's wet.
Yeah. Yeah. So it looks like you were telling yourself something a little bit more.
I think, I think back on it, it kind of goes with the train of thought that thinking because they think this way, I really shouldn't say some of these things. Like maybe I should pick a different topic. Maybe even though I do want to do the topic, there's what they think kind of makes me
now let's
overthink it, I guess.
That makes sense. But let's say you didn't censor yourself out of concern for how they might view your topic, and let's say like during your speech that they did come to that conclusion that what you were saying was controversial, or even that you were just a bad public speaker. Okay, so let's say they really did hate you and thought you did a terrible job. Then what?
Well,
what would be so horrible about that?
I guess it wouldn't really have any effect on me, physically or at all, really. I'd still be here,
yeah, you'd still be alive.
I'd still be giving the speech at the same time. Not so.
Do you think you would, if it was the case that they all hated you, you think you would lose your left leg? You think you would lose a hand, or, I mean, would it really be 100% bad as bad can be, if you did mess up and your worst fears came true? It looks like you could still deal with life. You could still get along in life, and but there's one point I do want to cover specifically, and it seems like you think that whatever conclusion they come to, that they're right, and that it says something about you. Namely, tell me if I'm incorrect, but it sounds like you were thinking something along the lines of, if I don't do well and I fall on my face, then I'm no good, because they're gonna think I'm a shitty presenter. And does that sound somewhere along the lines of some of the sentences you were telling yourself that?
Oh yeah, it's kind of like feeling a little bit embarrassed about those things, self-conscious. I guess it all comes back to how I really interpret the situation, how I react, how I respond. Like instead of me focusing on the paper itself, reading my notes, I was looking up at the crowd. I wasn't even interacting with the crowd really. I was, thinking too much.
Right.
I was like kind of at the same time. Probably many times, I know for a fact, many times I'd be talking and thinking at the same time. Because
Yes.
I practiced the speech, but I do like two different things.
Yeah, and chances are, if you're taking up so much of your attention on I better not mess up, I can't mess up or else, then chances are you're gonna mess up because you're so focused on not messing up that you're not focused on your speech and what you're up there to do. And we call this a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it doesn't do you any good, as you can tell, because you don't want to mess up. You prefer not to, which is understandable. But to really think that you absolutely must not mess up, do you see how that could be unrealistic in the sense that most people, most of the time, aren't very good at much of what they do? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It seems pretty realistic.
And in terms of your audience, it's like I said before, even if they all came to that conclusion that you didn't want them to come to, tell me, how exactly would that say something about you or what kind of person you are?
Well,
How are you making that connection?
I guess the connection I really only make is the one that I put on myself, the limit I place on how well I think I'm doing is how well I am going to do. It kind of goes along with that self-fulfilling prophecy.
How do you think, let me ask you this, let's back up. How do you think you would feel if you messed up a whole bunch and everyone did think poorly of you and your performance?
Well, I'd probably feel pretty sad walking out of there, like I didn't accomplish what I came in to do. Not that I really failed at the project itself, but failed at making progress to advance my skills.
So you think it does say something about you, whether or not they like or dislike you or your performance. Maybe think, for example, of everybody in the whole world. Let's say they all came to an agreement that the world is flat. Now, even if everyone in the whole world thought the earth is flat, would that agreement, that consensus alone, prove something about the world?
No, the world would be round regardless.
Right, that's right. It doesn't really say anything about the world, just that they all agree. So ask yourself, where's the evidence that I'm a worthless person because they don't like me? It's a magical connection. It's not really there because it takes your permission. You literally have to say to yourself, to feel worthless, yes, the value they place on me, I have to place on myself. And you don't have to do this. Where does it follow that because even if they thought you were no good of a person or speaker, where does it follow that you really are? Because as you just agreed, consensus alone doesn't tell us very much about anything. So, I would recommend that the next time you find yourself in a situation where you have to give a speech or just you're subject to evaluations of others, ask yourself, where's the evidence? And really focus and try and catch on to what you're telling yourself about the situation. Really think about those sentences you're telling yourself.
We've met before, and I've done those kind of things. I've stopped my thought processes and reinforce certain other kinds of thoughts to replace those kind of thoughts, but they just keep coming back.
Well, you haven't been working it. It's one thing to understand, yes, I'm telling myself silly things when I'm being evaluated and I feel anxious, and it's one thing to have the rational insight, but it's another thing to apply it to your life, because that's the only way a human being can change, is through work and practice. And so, like I said last week, it's really important for you to work on the homework that I give you. So for example, next week, one thing I'd like you to work at is really try and put yourself in a situation in which you might be evaluated. For example, going into a store or just some public place and just asking somebody what time it is or how's it going. And if you find that's really simple to do, you can ask silly questions like what year it is, or and you'll literally prove to yourself that you're not going to die, and that it's not awful and 100% bad. And once you do this enough and work and practice at it, eventually you can even start to have fun with it. Where one great example that I like to use is you can even take a banana, tie a string to it like a pet, and drag it around a crowded mall, and drag around this banana. And yes, you'll turn some heads. People might think, whatever they're going to think. But by the end of it, you'll know this, that you still have both legs, and nothing about you has really changed, and you can still get along in life. So
that seems like a more practical kind of homework rather than like the thought.
That's right.
Thinking your way into some kind of situation, thinking yourself, but actually getting out and socializing and interacting with the.
Yep.
Because that's what it is, really. Is like me sitting up talking on a speech. It's social. It's a social kind of anxiety, I think.
Well, keep in mind that it's very difficult to do these practical anxiety attacking exercises without first, beforehand, having acquired that rational insight, right? Because you're not going to put yourself out there. If you feel anxious about these situations, chances are you're not going to really put yourself out there unless you grant some degree of credence to the idea that, hey, maybe I am incorrect in the conclusions I've made and evaluations I've made about how awful it would be for them to disapprove of my actions. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. That's a big thing, is, the getting around the stubbornness of the ways,
Yes.
like being like an old timer stuck in the past, doing the same, doing it the old fashioned way, It's kind of, I guess, evolving.
Well, to put it simply, change is difficult. It's hard. It's much easier to stay in your patterns and your ways. And the key is to, once you have taken that step, and literally force yourself to get up and go out and do these exercises or just interact socially, you'll not only prove to yourself that the world's not going to end, but you'll also start to see that it's important to be consistent, because it's always going to be easier to slide back into your old ways and to just as you said, be an old man, you know. So consistency is very, you told me you've played sports, and it's a lot like lifting and exercise. What happens when you miss a couple days and you don't keep on yourself about getting out there and exercising?
You can like lose muscle tone, or
Right.
Maybe even not, feel not as good. Or, it's kind of like, what's the word? I don't know if there's a word for it, but feeling. You know how you like feel relieved after you lift. You haven't lifted in a while. You lift.
Yeah.
Put up the weight. And, I guess it's kind of like that. It's kind of like a weight off your shoulders that you did make some kind of progression.
But what happens when you don't make that progress? When you just don't feel like working out and don't do it? Are you going to get any stronger?
No.
No. And so, it's hard to work out. And similarly, giving speeches is not easy, or interacting socially is difficult. But if you don't work at it, how much do you think is really going to change, right? If you're not each and every time saying, wait a minute, what am I telling myself about what's happening? Or even before it happens, what are my views about this? And really question, dispute these evaluations you're making, and ask yourself, where's the evidence? Where does it logically follow that this will happen because I do X, Y, or Z?
A lot of times it's happened. Things that come to mind, a lot of them aren't There are a lot of fear-based, kind of like emotional reactions to, to
distasteful events. Surely you're not gonna like everything that happens. So
Right.
it's how you think about it, like you've been saying.
Right. It's not distasteful in itself. It's a property you're ascribing to the situation. So with your situation, there's nothing really anxiety provoking about giving speeches and having everyone's attention on you. It being a horrible or potentially awful thing, if it turns out the way you didn't, is something you give to that situation. There's nothing about being in front of people in itself that provokes anxiety, because as you agreed, if everyone was in that situation, we surely wouldn't all respond the same. Think, for example, away from your situation, have you ever been on an airplane?
Yeah.
On an airplane, if an airplane was inherently scary in itself, everyone would be really scared. But you don't see that, do you? You see people reading, sleeping, and some people really are scared, praying, all sorts of stuff. You see what I mean? So make sure that when you come to that quick inference that that person made me feel this way, or doing this or that is making me anxious, ask yourself, what is it about this situation that's anxious? And if you look for the evidence and ask those questions, you won't find anything. It's going to come down to your subjectivity, your views about it. And chances are, if you're feeling the way you have been, those views aren't on par with reality, and they're extreme negative evaluations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really want to, this summer especially, give the walking up to random people and saying like introducing yourself, greetings, fucking just social interaction.
Yeah.
Give it a go.
It's good practice. And also, you can do, like I said, you can do all sorts of different things. Some are even fun. Yeah, so good. That's definitely something I want you to work on. And if there's anything I want you to leave here today with, it's this. Giving speeches, yes, it's not comfortable. You may not even prefer it as something to do, but it's not awful. It's not as bad can be. Granted, you don't like it, you can still stand it. Okay?
Yeah.
Because if you couldn't stand it, you'd be dead. I mean,
I completely.
you're sitting here today.
I completely agree.
Okay.
You just gotta, focus in, concentrate, and
Right, that consistency.
think more. I guess responsively to what's really going on, to reality, logically,
Yeah,
instead of fantasizing and going off on a train of thought.
that's right. Yeah. Just like I said, just with like lifting and exercising, keep yourself in check. And again, likewise, it's a skill like anything else. It's something you work at. So, and before you can work at it, you got to understand what you're doing, what you're telling yourself. So I'm glad that we made that step today. Sounds good. Okay?
Alright.
All right, Jared. Sounds good. Looks like our time's about up. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
It went pretty good. That was good.
Sounds good, man. I agree.
Jared, I think we covered just about everything.
How much time did elapse?
I think we covered more than everything.